morning, students.
Good morning, Miss Frizzle.
Did you guys remember to bring your permission slips?
I don't mind. I'm so excited to see how the environment was different during the Industrial Revolution.
Me too. Arnold?
Got mine.
Okay then, let's go. Seatbelts, everyone.
Oh, please let this be a normal field trip.
With the frizz?
No way!
Aww.
Next stop, the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. We're here. Can you smell that, kids?
Smell what?
That fresh, clean air.
Whoa, so many trees.
Why aren't there that many at the park back home?
Well, we're at a farm at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution.
How do they harvest this with just their hands?
Well, I do see one invention over there, but I have no clue what it is.
That's a thresher.
What's a thresher?
A thresher is a machine that was invented in 1786. It is used to separate peas, wheat, soybeans, and other grain and seed crops.
Oh, I remember learning that during class.
This rural and natural landscape has a lot of greenery because machines were being used, which would have let out a lot of pollution. Are there any questions?
What is rural?
Rural means away from city and usually smaller towns and more agriculture.
Were there even cities back then?
Well, because this was before the Industrial Revolution, there were more rural areas. But as we go on through time, you'll see that how cities began to take over.
So are we actually going to see what cities were like?
Actually, a city is our next destination.
Here we go.
Which is an urban area.
Whoa, why are there so many people here? I can barely even move.
Well, you see, a lot of people were moving to the cities from rural areas because they could get higher paying jobs, and this was called urbanization.
Why are people paying more in the city?
The wealthier people owned the factories and had more money to pay workers.
Hey, what's that building over there?
That's called a tenement.
What's a tenement?
A tenement is a small apartment building usually found in poorer neighborhoods with poor living conditions.
What does that mean?
That means the buildings were small, dirty, and crammed full of people.
That sounds terrible.
Was there something to keep the buildings safe?
Well, I remember reading something about the building codes. Isn't that a bunch of rules that makes the construction workers have to follow while constructing buildings?
That's right, but those rules weren't published until the 1900s.
Why are there so many trash here?
Well, that has to do with urbanization.
That's right, the more people that moved here meant more consumer goods were being produced, which led to the trash on the floor.
Why didn't their parents just tell them not to litter?
Well, you see, Arnold, at the time, people didn't understand it would lead to a huge problem like this.
What problem?
Actually, our next destination describes the exact problem I am talking about.
Where are we going next?
Factories. On the bus, everyone.
Are you okay?
How are you okay? There's so much gas in the air.
That's not gas, that's pollution from the factories.
And why is the river run red? It's the end of the world!
No, Arnold, that's red dye.
Die? We're gonna die?
No, that's just water pollution from the factories. They use dye to color the textiles.
There's pollution in the air and water, Arnold.
Than there was before.
Yeah, a lot of immigrants were in the labor pool for factories.
And that's how disease spread. The public health was very poor at that time.
Can we go inside?
We can, but it's not too pretty.
Why are they being yelled at?
Well, the children weren't treated very well.
They worked long-term, but got paid very little.
You definitely did your research. Are we ready to go to London?
We're going to London?
It's not the same as it was, though.
It's fine. Let's check it out.
Take out your mask, everyone.
Keisha! Dorothy, Miss Frizzle, where are you?
Relax. We're right here. But why is it so dark here?
It's dark because there's so much smog.
Why so much?
A toxic and deadly smog swept over London, killing around 1,200 people in just a few days. It came from the huge amount of factories burning coal for power and citizens burning coal for heat. The smog was so thick that you could barely see anything in front of you, and people had to hold flares in the street so that buses knew where they were going.
I read an editorial about this once back at home, but I had no clue how bad this actually was.
Let's get out of here before I pass out.
On the bus, everyone.
Where are we headed next?
Please say nothing worse than that.
Could it get any worse?
Actually, we're going back to the factories.
Oh, my lungs are going to be so unhealthy after this.
Okay, cut.
It's going to be a little different this time. See, London had a huge issue. While they were working, they weren't thinking about the possibility of long-term problems. When they realized the issues they were creating, they started the Clean Air and Water Act.
What's that?
The Clean Air Act started in 1970. Although it was long after the Industrial Revolution, it was a huge improvement in our environment and increased most people's lifespan. The Clean Air Act was a list of rules that had to be followed to decrease the pollution in certain areas.
What are the rules?
There were smokeless zones, the use of solid fuels were minimized, taller chimneys were built so particles were released higher into the atmosphere.
Man, that must have helped a lot with climate change.
Not as much as you would think.
What about the Clean Water Act?
The Clean Water Act came a couple of years later in 1972. It reduces water pollution. The anti-pollution legislations followed these rules, and they still do today. The U.S. has relatively clean, safe drinking water compared to the rest of the world.
I'm getting tired.
Yeah, we're going to head back to the classroom now and talk about what we've learned today.
On the bus, everyone.
First, I'm going to answer some questions. Who has some?
Wait, I just realized they have no electricity.
That's because electrification didn't come until the 20th century.
Oh yeah, there was no electricity, so they had to burn coal to run their steam engines that created power for the factories. They created terrible air pollution in the city, and people also needed to burn coal to heat their homes, which only added to the massive amount of pollution. So how much did electricity change since then?
Well, inventors were constantly working on making energy more efficient so that we can have more readily available to the public.
Finally got Wi-Fi back.
Wow, you're that dependent on your phone. What happened to our culture?
Great question, Keisha. Technology has become such an important piece of our lives. It has made communication easier, manual labor has become automated, and we have grown to be dependent on technology. Did anyone notice any of the changes as we drove along the Industrial Revolution?
Well, I noticed as we got closer to modern times, buildings just kept getting taller.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
That's because of the modern-day elevator.
What do you mean?
Huh?
Earlier in time, the lower class had to climb the stairs to live on the top floor, and that was very difficult. But once elevators were invented, it was much easier to get to the top of the building. Now, I have a question for you. There's no right or wrong answer. Do you think the Industrial Revolution improved our environment and population?
I think that the Industrial Revolution brought both good and bad things to our modern world. It generated great ideas, inventions, and philosophies, but it also brought lots of pollution and inventions that harm our environment, and we became a lot too dependent on material things.
It can be both. It provided a better living condition, but it brought damage to the earth and more diseases.
I agree with Arnold and Keisha. Even though the Industrial Revolution brought pollutions and epidemics, in the end it provided better living conditions and technologies for everyone.